Hi, Yvonne. I'm Christy. Nice to kind of virtually meet you. And welcome to your reading. I um, I have run up a bit against a bit of a wall with your reading. I'm not gonna lie. Um, and I don't know. Like I know I've messaged you a bit just to let you know. Like energetically, it didn't feel right. It was really strange. Like when I sat down to do it on Saturday, I got about 5 minutes in, and I was like drop dead tired. Like, oh, I have to sleep right now. Um, all the energy just completely left me, and I kind of tested it on Sunday. Didn't work. Um, I have several people in line for readings. You were actually at the first of the line, but when I sat down to do my readings yesterday, it was like, nope, go to the next person. And I was like, okay. So I finally feel like I have a bit of an open door here, and at least I don't feel any resistance. So we're going to give it a go. One thing I did want to say was you had mentioned wanting to know if your husband is watching over you. And I feel like it's important for me to say that um, that's not really my realm. Um, you may consider finding a medium, and a medium is going to be more likely to interact with the spirits of the deceased, or a shaman. A shaman will also do that. Um, I simply convey messages from spirit. I don't have any interaction with that, and there's nothing against it. It's just not my area, not my specialty, if you will. So, so those are a couple resources for you, and spirit may have some things to say about your husband, but it won't necessarily be that like you won't be getting any direct messages from him, unfortunately. And I'm sorry if that's something that you were looking forward to. Um, but I think spirit has a good deal to say to you. So, um, that at least saying that gave me some goosebumps. So that gives me some confirmation that that's the case. Some things to consider during my readings. I usually recommend that you have a pen and a piece of paper handy. And as with anything that's spiritual or intangible, I usually recommend that you take what resonates with you, leave behind what doesn't. And that can be across the board, anything that's spiritual. So I like to put that out there because I know people in general, struggle with a lot of things that have to do with religion and things that they've been told that don't quite resonate with them and don't sit well with them, but they feel like they still need to act on them. And I just in general, anything that's intangible, and spiritual slash religious life is intangible. Um, it's really important to tune in to how you resonate with something, how you respond to it, and then act accordingly. So what do I mean by resonate? um, the analogy I usually give is of, like, say, a guitar string, where you pluck the guitar string and it vibrates, and then it's that vibration really that's making the sound that we hear. Okay. And that's why when you tune a guitar, you loosen the string or tighten the string, and that really affects the vibrational quality. So when something resonates within you, it literally vibrates. So you feel it in your body, and you can feel it in a way that's like, oh, that is off key and that feels icky, or that is right on and I feel like inspired. So resonation doesn't necessarily dictate the kind of emotional response you have, but it does mean that you have a response of some kind. If you have no response, like if it falls completely flat, that's when you leave it behind. And to be really honest, we usually forget those things anyway, so it's not a problem. I did want to open up our time together with a card from the Universe Has Your Back deck. That's what this looks like. This is a really good go-to deck. It's got some great mantras. Every one of them has great mantras. I like the inside of the box. You are the dreamer of the dream. And a friend got me these actually, and for a period of time I was drawing a card every day and just kind of focusing and meditating on that. So that's a really good use of these cards. All right. This one just stood out to me, and I think it's the one that I tried to skip over, and it was like, no, I want to be shared. Okay, and this says, the more energy and intention I bring to my faith, the more fearless and free I am. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I will point out the hummingbird, and you may consider looking up hummingbird spirit animals just to see what that offers. But then also you're welcome to take this message as a mantra for yourself, something to repeat throughout the day. And for your reading, we are going to be using the Wildwood Tarot deck. This has been my go-to deck recently, and I think honestly because a lot of my readings have had to do with spiritual growth, and this deck is very spiritually focused. It's based on the year of the wheel, which is the pagan observation of the seasons and the changes in the year. But essentially with that being pagan, it just means that it's very earth-based spirituality. So it's very grounded in nature, and the kind of the themes and the symbology of the woods, the wild wood, okay, the forest basically. So I've been meditating on you here. I usually present the question that you have, but I also ask Spirit what message you should be receiving today. And that way, hopefully the question gets answered, but if there are any deeper questions that are more important, those are also getting addressed. Okay, so let me get set up here. I've also saged my space here. That's something that ritualistically I like to make sure that I do every time I do a reading, and I also like to sage my deck to kind of clear those out. And just so you know, if you're familiar with tarot at all, which I think, I think you had said you'd not had one. You can correct me if I'm wrong. There's some debate as to whether when you draw a card, you read it whether it's upside down or not, or right side up. I am reading all of mine right side up, so that's just for you to know. If it came up upside down, I'm reading it right side up, and I'm trusting that the messages will come forth either way. All right, so I am working with the Celtic Cross layout here, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to try to get all the cords out here. Okay. So feel free to take a pause. Oh, there we go. You can see the layout of your spread here. And Celtic Cross is pretty standard. Mostly because, honestly, it gives us it gives me anyway, a really good picture of what's going on and what to talk about and pay attention to. So we're just going to dive in for the sake of time here. The first three cards in the middle, and these are the only cards that lay, that move in a parallel to me direction. The middle card is the one I always start with, and that is the where you are in the present moment. And this is the Six of Bows, which is abundance. And so I love this card. It's one of my favorites. It's Bows symbolize, they correspond with wands in the traditional tarot. So we'll find in this deck that the theme of tarot runs through this deck very strongly, but it translates differently. Um, and Six of Bows corresponds with wands, which is wands generally are kind of the ethereal connection, like the spiritual, like magical manifestation space. And essentially, where you are right now is in a state of abundance. And what may be really important right now to do is to take a step back and start listing all the things that you feel grateful for that seem in abundance, okay? And it could be just like, it could even be like, I have an abundance of work to do, okay? Right? Job security, okay? Sometimes an abundance of work is not always a bad thing. Now, it gets harder when we're trying to balance it with the rest of our life, but it's still important to give gratitude for the things we find in abundance in our lives. And so sitting back and making that list of that gratitude list, I think will really help you to see that you are moving into a state of abundance, even if it doesn't seem that way on the outside, or if it doesn't seem that way in an area of life that you would prefer it to be abundant, okay? That's usually where we find that we think we're not abundant. And honestly, that usually comes down to, I think the two things that we crave the most are love and romantic love usually, and finances. And so when we find that one or the other or both of those are not as abundant as we would like, then we focus a lot on what we don't have. And this is going to be a really important time for you to sit with that list of gratitude and to acknowledge just how truly abundant you are, but also the next layer of that, which is that you manifested that. That's your work, okay? Recent past, the card we have in that place is the Seven of Vessels, which is mourning. There's obviously some death and emptiness in this card. Based on what you shared with me, I'm not surprised that this is the recent past. And there's almost a sense of like with these cups. So vessels translates to cups in tarot. A lot of the reason I'm telling you this is if you want to explore any of these cards individually, you can. There's a really good resource online called Biddy Tarot, Biddy Tarot. And she actually has every card and gives a pretty thorough explanation for them. What I suggest usually when you do that is keep your pen and paper handy. Write down the phrases that stick out to you, even if it's just a word. Don't worry about trying to comprehend the whole message. That's not the point. Spirit is trying to get your attention with certain phrases or words. So just pay attention to those. A lot of times I will, if I'm doing a reading for someone, I'll be like, I'll just scan and I'll go, oh, that word sticks out, and I'll share it with them. So that's something that you can do to kind of expand your reading a little bit here. But vessels corresponds with cups, and that is usually the emotional realm. And water is very present in the cups. With this card, the cups are empty. And I get the kind of the sense that I got was just like crying your eyes out to dry. Like to that point where you're just like, you can't cry anymore. You're completely dry. I think why this card is showing up is that it's important to note that you've been seen and heard through that process. And grief feels so isolating, and it can really make us feel like no one sees us, no one knows what we're going through. And just want to let you know you have been seen and heard through this process. Near future is the World Tree. And to me, there's almost this sense, this is number 21 in the Major Arcana. I'll explain what arcanas in a minute here, but there's almost this sense for me of evolution. So kind of going from this dry, desolate place with the morning um, into the current where you've got like bushels of fruit and everything. And then the near future being this just like lush, extravagant tree. And that's super connected with the spiritual world and the change. Like it's even got all the seasons here. So you can see spring, summer, fall, and winter. Like it's all encompassing. Um, this labyrinth, this prayer labyrinth, I don't know if you've ever done a prayer labyrinth. It is a beautiful process. Essentially, what you do is you enter here. So if you see, you enter here, and actually, I don't know where the entrance is in this. This is an interesting one. You enter it, and if you see, if you follow the path, it winds and it winds and it winds. And what it does is the first half, it leads you into the center. And when you get there, you are the kind of the charge is to let it all go, leave it all there in the center. And so as you're making your way toward the center, you're really kind of like dragging, like if you think about like dragging a river bottom, like that's what you're doing with your body, emotional, mental, spiritual body. You're kind of dragging the river bottom for anything that does not belong there anymore. And you're doing this as you walk to the center. And when you get to the center, you have as much time as you need to identify and release those things. And then once you're done, you stay there as long as you need to. Once you're done, then you begin to make your way out. And it again leads you through in a similar path, but different from what you came in on. So symbolically, it's like you're now on a new path. And you have all that space to grieve and to honestly to acknowledge feeling lighter. The first time I did a prayer labyrinth was in Toronto, and I cried and cried, and I felt such relief when I was done. So it's a tremendous practice. If you can find a prayer labyrinth, I would highly recommend going through that. And I think for your spiritual journey and the emotional and mental healing that you're doing, it'll be really helpful for you. The card that overlays these, and that can be, that is usually serves as a bridge, either a bridge or a barrier from your recent past to your near future, is the Page of Arrows, which is this little wren. And I think he's beautiful. Probably one of the most understated birds in the forest. There's not much to be said about the wren. They are, they're small, and they generally stay low to the ground within bushes and things like that. And I mean, they don't do any glorious hunting. They don't have amazing wing spreads. Like, they're a very humble bird. And at the same time, they're very fierce in terms of survival. Like, they really they have it down. I mean, the wren is a bird that will probably not leave the forest anytime soon because they know how to survive and propagate. And I think, so in terms of bridge or barrier, I think it's a little bit of both, okay? I think as in terms of a bridge, there has been a sense of survival. Forefront of your mind is just survival, just getting through. And that has served a purpose for you. It really has. The barrier aspect of it is that you're playing too small. So survival is only meant to be for a season. Otherwise, we are beings that are meant to live in states of thrival, okay? So what happens is if we are only in a state of survival for most of our lives, we actually aren't able to create anything ever. Not anything lasting, because survival is day to day. So you may be able to create a solution for today, but it's generally not a sustainable solution because it doesn't have the energy behind it of well, I know I'm going to survive. And so now how can I move forward in a real and lasting way? Survival also tends to keep us stuck in a cycle of fear based and instant decision making. So we're not spending a lot of time like planning and dreaming and allowing spirit to kind of come in and create solutions with us, where we get to be co-conspirators in the life that we're building. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think it is that like fierce determination to survive, but also then getting stuck there and playing too small in life. Um, which makes sense some of the next cards that are coming up. So the card that sits here in our hopes, above and below these cards, we have hopes and fears. And the card that's in the hope category is the Four of Stones. Stones correlates to um, pentacles and coins and or coins in the traditional tarot. It's a very material based, anything that's tangible in the real world, like in the material world. That's the core. That's the um, excuse me, my eye itches. That's what it corresponds with. Um, and I think with this, there's this hope that you're going to have everything that you need. And that may be like a hope that you're not even yet willing to share, even with yourself, or admit to yourself. But the hope is that you're going to be provided for. In the fears category, we have the Five of Bows, which is empowerment. You know, and it's so funny when a card like this comes up in the fear category, because it's like, oh, empowerment. Everybody wants empowerment, right? But I think about the Marianne Williamson quote and someone just sent this to me. Actually, I'm going to read it to you. So that's also part of what I do is if things come to me like that, and I feel like, especially when they come out of the blue and I'm like, oh, I have that. I like to share those because I believe there is a reason that all these things are connected. And so when things come up, I share them. And then you have some additional resources if you want to keep exploring. But so Marianne Williamson wrote this, and she says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And I can say from personal experience that that is very true. I have worked very hard to liberate myself from the fear that I was raised under and in and around. And the more I free myself and heal myself from those things, the more I find that people respond in a way that is relieving and refreshing for them. So if that is something that you're struggling with, which I have a feeling it is, given that this empowerment card came up in your fear category, practice little acts of boldness, okay? People don't get to the edge of the cliff ready and willing to jump without first building 1,000 steps before that of taking risk and taking and being brave and being courageous. And so, you know, it may be sometimes when we're in a state of depression, and I'm not saying that's where you are, but I just felt a need to share that sometimes when we're in a state of depression, the boldest thing we can do is like go to the grocery store. And that seems very simple and sometimes silly, but it's true. That is really the boldest thing we can do, because it means leaving our comfort zone. It means facing strangers. It means completing a transaction, right? And so sometimes it's really okay to start very small in our bold acts, because those will snowball into bigger, braver acts. And before you know it, you're making an action that feels so right and so in integrity and in authenticity with yourself. And people are looking at you going, you are so brave. And you're like, that's just all I need to do. So a little bit of my story. I am originally from Indiana. I felt that I needed to move from Indianapolis, that I just come to the end of my road there, was how I felt at the time. And I was originally going to apply for grad school in Oregon, and then I was originally going to do the PCT in Oregon. I kept getting all these like hits, like I need to go to Oregon. And finally, when I was waiting for my grad school application to be approved or denied, eventually denied, a friend of mine was like, you should just start saying I'm going either way. I'm going to move either way. And I did. It was shaky at first, and honestly, I didn't believe it, and I didn't have a plan for it. But I was telling people, I think I wouldn't even say I think. I was like, I'm going to move either way. And then the more I said it, the more I believed it, and the more it really put into action what I was doing. And I started selling my things, and I set a date, and then I got the grad school denial, and I was like, it doesn't matter at this point. It's already in motion. It's already going to happen. And I was satisfied with that. I was very scared. Like, I had to face a lot of things through that 6 to 8 month period of decision, and planning. But, what I really came to was like, this is the most right next thing for me to do. And I had people constantly who were like, this is so brave. You are so brave. And I was like, I'm just making the next step. So it snowballs. Okay. It snowballs. And if you feel like there's something you really need to be doing, or moving toward, just start saying it. Just start saying it out loud. I'm going to do this. It could be 10 years. Who cares? Nobody's putting a timeline on you, right? But it's important to start putting it in motion, letting those brave steps snowball for you. Momentum, building momentum. So you have some powerful allies. I'm getting the sense that these are all allies. The Page of Stones, which is a lynx. Powerful instincts, quick to move, and quick to move on their instincts. So that is a really special gift. This is an energy you can draw on. The Kingfisher, which is the king of arrows here. And for this guy, I'm getting the power of perspective. So with a bird, you get the higher, broader range perspective. And for a lot of people, that is their spiritual connection to the divine. Personally, I like to consider a connection to my higher self. That is kind of this like spirit self up in the ether that can see much farther than I can and guides my steps so that I am prepared for whatever I'm going to encounter next. The Seer, which is number 2 in a major arcana. And this is the power of so I think with the links, it was like the ability to act quickly on your intuition. This is the intuition itself. And the major and minor arcana are, so here's kind of how that works. In the tarot deck, there's the minor arcana. That's where we get the suits, like the 4 of bows, the 2 of swords, 2 of stones, like that kind of thing. And those are powerful messages, but they tend to be a little bit more transient, a little bit weaker. If you think about like kind of like the difference between like um, a weak coffee and then an espresso, in terms of that weak coffee being the major arcana. Like you're still going to get caffeine buzz from it. You're still going to, if it's warm, you might feel a little bit satisfied. Whereas the espresso, it's going to be potent, it's going to hit fast, and it's going to last a while. That's the major arcana. And the major arcana usually just has a number and then the name of that specific character. The seer is very tuned into the other world, to the spiritual world. So that is another person, or that is another energy that you have at your disposal. The next, and I shouldn't say disposal, they're here to serve you, really. They're here to help you and guide you. So you asked it what you should do next. And honestly, I'm never going to get that in a tarot reading, what a person should specifically do next. The reason is because generally you already know. And if you don't, then you're really disconnected from yourself. And the thing you should do next is work on connection to yourself. And so connection comes through meditation, prayer, any kind of spiritual practice, any kind of mindfulness. Meditation and yoga are huge for this because they really bring you back into yourself, and they generally force you to sit with yourself, which inability to sit with ourselves is why we disconnect in the first place. And trauma and grief, they have the tendency to do that because trauma and grief are so hard to move through. I mean, layered emotions, like it's painful, first of all. There's a literal pain. But then there's also usually like anger, like, why did this have to happen? Or why did this person let me struggle in this way? Why did God let me struggle in this way? Like we ask so many questions about why. And then there's usually a growth component, because grief is so expanding. It's like that water that gets into the crack of a stone and then freezes, and it's expanding that crack, and it can be just utterly painful in a way that we don't want to deal with. And so, oh man, train of thought just done. Mindfulness practices. That's where I was going with that. Mindfulness practices bring us back to center, and they really help us to focus and to sit with that grief. Because here's the beauty. Grief is in a lot of ways like a kidney stone. Okay. I don't know if you've ever had one. I personally have not, but I have known people who have. It's painful in the passing, but it does pass. It does pass. And with grief, it doesn't just pass once. Generally, it passes many times, but every time the passing gets less painful, until eventually, it may just be a little ping of a thing. This tattoo that I have was born out of a season of grief, and it was in 2007, so 12 years ago now. And to be honest, I really connected with that grief for a long time. It was multi-layered, and now it's a shadow to me now. Like I don't, I can talk about it, I can tell the story, but I really don't remember it in terms of like real emotional connection anymore. And I think that's because I did the work of letting the grief rise and pass, rise and pass, rise and pass. And it can be exhausting, hard work, and it really takes over our life when it comes. But there is a beautiful aftermath that comes. And I feel like I need to read a poem that I just read about that. I just wrote, excuse me, because it talks about that. Okay, this was after one of my grief sessions. This is something that I wrote. And just like that, an old grief is resurrected, a dragon of fire, a dungeon of darkness, and it throws you to the floor of the bathroom in tears and screams you never could issue then. A fresh grief and an old holding hands. It takes time, the time it needs to take, and under the hot water of the shower you sing again, a new song and an old, and a voice altogether stronger and more clear and more yours. In the morning, a tear or two remains on the periphery of your eyes, but a new feeling comes like a cleansing, a bowl scrubbed clear of old debris, the old meal of sadness and death gone for the moment, and in its place a green sapling ready for growth. And I'll send you this, actually, a copy of this in text so you can have it. But that was just something that came to me after a moment of grief, and felt very powerful and hopeful at the same time. The last guy that we have here is the Page of Bows, which is a stoat. I honestly don't know what a stoat is, so I'm going to look that up real quick. And then we're going to go over time just a little bit because I felt that I needed to pull 3 more cards for you. 3 more? One more. Because generally that Page of Bows is the resolution card, but it's not a resolution. It's an ally. The thing that sticks out for me is the ability to perceive the truth in almost any matter is vastly helpful, and your freedom of spirit marks you out as an original and unique personality. And so I think what the stoat is offering you is the ability to discern truth, but also to live in deep freedom. Playfulness, even, to have that playfulness about you. Okay. 1 more, 2 more. Sorry, I'm getting conflicting answers. 2. All right, 2 more cards here. One is the Breath of Life. This is the Ace of Arrows. The other is the Moon on the Water, which is 18 in the Major Arcana. Deep spiritual connection here, especially for women. The moon, we are lunarly, we are literally connected. Our cycles are based on the cycles of the moon. The moon is a powerful entity for us. So I've recommended this to several people. I'm going to recommend it to you as well, which is to establish some kind of ritual around the moon. Generally, that's the new moon and the full moon. And it can be whatever you want. Like, a lot of people will put out water for the full moon. If you have crystals, they'll put out their crystals to charge. A friend and I have been doing some grief resolution on the new moon. And the new moon is generally very low energy. It's a time to kind of plant seeds and like nurture and do that. The full moon is the time to reap the rewards and do a lot of reflection, and it's also very high energy. For me personally, I like to do tarot spreads on both days. So if you do ever find that you have a deck and you want to work with it, Biddy Tarot has some good spreads for that. Whatever the case, let it be something that resonates with you, that honors your connection to the divine and to your spiritual self. The Ace of Arrows is this breath of life, and I think this is just an encouragement that life has been very heavy, and for you especially, a lot of loss, a lot of grief. I get this like image of just like choking on smoky air, almost like everything is so thick and so gray, like it's literally choking you. And things are shifting, the winds are changing, and a new fresh breath of life is being blown into you that will be invigorating and powerful and healing for you. And so essentially, you're at a turning point. If you haven't hit it already, you will soon. And new life is coming if you are ready for it. But you have to be open and willing to receive it. So, whatever that looks like in terms of how you need to sit with being open and willing to receive, I would recommend taking that to your prayer and meditation time. If you don't have a prayer and meditation time, I would recommend carving a space out every day. You don't want to actively meditate, at least go there and sit. And that can be a really good starting point if you're not used to meditating, is to carve out the space and the physical space and the time space, and go there and sit and let it become rhythmically a part of your day. And then eventually maybe you like start setting the timer on your phone and saying, I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes, and you close your eyes and you really like just focus on being centered and present. You can also use guided meditations. Those help a lot. You can find them on YouTube. But prayer and meditation are being very important to you. And on that note, if anything has come up in your reading that you want clarity on, you are welcome to ask me. I'll be very honest and say a lot of times I forget the readings once they're done, or at least I forget the intricacies of them. So usually if you have a question of like, I don't understand why this thing is coming up or what that card means, I can usually give you clarity on a card itself. But if you have a question about the message, that's a really good thing to take into your prayer and meditation space. So the only other thing I'll say is, and I should have said this at the beginning, I don't know why I didn't, but it's just coming to me again, is that write down what you heard, okay? Don't worry about writing down word for word what I've said. Write down what you heard. Spirit is creative, uses my messages and translates them to you in a way that's unique to you, in a way that you need to hear. So if you go back and you're like, oh, she actually said da da da, but I heard this, write down what you heard, okay? And what I actually said may play into something down the road that makes more sense to you. But like I had a friend, when her and I got our first tarot reading several years ago, she recorded the message on her phone, and she just went back recently, and she had remembered the lady saying, you know, your dancing partner. But what she'd actually said was someone to dance in the kitchen with. And I think at the time, my friend was not ready to hear that specific. But when she heard it again, she was like, yes, that's what I want. At the time, she was clinging so hard to her relationship that she had that she couldn't see that that was a possibility. So I really think that these messages are very layered, and that's why I love to share them as video links, because you can go back over time and re-listen to them and probably still get something out of it. So I hope this has been a blessing to you. I am always open to referrals. In fact, I love referrals. It's the most humbling thing when you share my work with other people, and affirming thing as well. And also, if you do refer someone through the end of this month, I am offering a $5 credit to you for any future readings that you have. Okay. So many blessings to you. I love feedback if you have some, but don't feel pressured. I think most people feel pretty overwhelmed when they first hear their reading. So don't feel like you have to come back and report back to me. You don't. But if you do have feedback, my door is always open. Blessings to you, Yvonne. Sending you all kinds of love and light.